This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there, welcome to this edition of Global Business Africa. In the course of the hour, we'll run through the business news stories you need to know about from the continent and beyond. But first, a run through the markets. We're just, of course, about 6 days into 2021. South African equities continue to rally fairly strongly. In fact, the all-share index at the JSE slammed into an all-time record today, 61,857.42 points. Platinum miners like Impala, Sibanye-Stillwater, Anglo-American Platinum among those driving the gains. Index heavyweight Naspers has gone up by nearly 3% since the year started. Kenya's equity markets are short of agriculture stocks that are representing the floriculture sector in detail, but we'll explore the effects of some surprise tax changes on that sector in the next 15 minutes. Main indices in the US all in the green today, following the results from the 2 Senate races in Georgia. We'll, of course, have updates from the United States in the next hour. Here's what's coming up tonight. The US Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin makes a maiden tour of Sudan. But what exactly is achieved there? Kenyan flour exporters have been hit with a new tax. And car sales in Japan have dropped to the lowest level in 9 years. Let's start the hour, though, in Sudan, where the United States has agreed to clear at least $1 billion of the country's arrears due to the World Bank. This was announced during a visit by the Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin in Khartoum. This is the first by a U.S. Treasury official to Sudan in over 2 decades. Now, that announcement also comes a month after Washington removed Sudan from its list of state sponsors of terror. Mnuchin's visit focused on Sudan's struggling economy and possible U.S. economic assistance. Sudan's presence on the U.S. terror list had for years cut it off from obtaining much-needed financial aid, foreign investment, and even access to foreign credit markets. The country currently has over $60 billion just in foreign public debt, and relief from its arrears and access to foreign credit markets is widely seen as a key gateway to its economic recovery. Let's jump into some analysis of what exactly this visit and the decisions arrived at in that visit mean for Sudan. Sarah Kira is a policy analyst. She's also the director of the European North Africa Centre for Research. She joins us now live from Cairo. Thank you for your time this evening. So this visit comes barely a month after Sudan was removed from the US list of state sponsors of terror. But what tangible outcomes really does it provide to Sudan?
Well, this visit is very important because the U.S. is the biggest economy in the world. And it was the cause, or one of the causes, why Sudan has been put in this situation, through putting Sudan in the terror sponsorship list of the U.S. This has caused Sudan to not be able to gain any foreign currency through imports and exports and through the normal economic cycles of any state. So Sudan has been suffering of a lot of sanctions, and now to lift the economy or to boost it a little bit and have the economy of Sudan up and going and running again, it had to be lifted from that terrorist. First of all, this visit shows some U.S. trust in the new Sudanese government and in the transitional period, the democratic transitional period of Sudan. So this visit is symbolic of the U.S. trust or the openness to Sudan and to its economic and financial plans in the future, along with the democratic transition through the civilian military-led government.
Indeed, so Sudan has...
That's why this visit is important now, and it will...
Sudan has roughly $60 billion in public debt as we speak. And the IMF did estimate that the country needs about $5.4 billion just to raise its foreign currency reserves to at least 3 months' worth of imports and stop central bank financing. But we've heard about this offer to clear arrears from the United States to the tune of about $1 billion. But surely Sudan needs a lot more help than that, doesn't it?
Yes, to be able to solve this financial crisis of Sudan, first of all, as I told you, it needed trust. especially the IMF talking about what Sudan needs and how it could help or what exactly it needs to overcome this financial crisis. It seems that again Sudan is back to the international orbit and is back to the international organizations and back to the international community. First of all, it will relieve the economy of Sudan, and it will help the Sudanese government have more flow of foreign currency through imports and exports and through openness again to international financing institutions, and it will help the government lift a little bit of the subsidies that takes a lot of the budget and the GDP. First of all, the GDP of Sudan didn't have any income more than the taxes of the people who are themselves suffering economically and financially because the state is suffering and because the state has gone through bankruptcy. So today, I think Sudan needs more of a Marshall Plan. That Marshall Plan that Europe had after World Wars. I think Sudan needs, if the US is truly to help Sudan recover and overcome this financial crisis, I think it will need an international sort of Marshall Plan to save Sudan from this financial and economic crisis and help it pave the way to a better future.
The military, of course, in Sudan still has a fair bit of control over some economic assets, thought to be roughly 200 companies in the non-defense areas, covering everything from gold to meat exports, flour production. Can we really have any real economic reforms, though, while the military still has control of all these assets? I mean, surely at some point they have to give them up.
I think this one of the topics. This is one of the important topics that will be discussed with the Sudanese new led government throughout this visit. But it's still very hard to let the military out of some of the economic aspects, because how the military sees it in Sudan is that we're trying to provide the people as much as we can, and we cannot let the market be not controlled now because we still don't have enough income to have a free market. So that's the Sudanese side of it, and I don't think the military will be out of any economic activities any soon, but it might be discussed during this visit, and if any difficulties, I don't think the military will be out of the major, especially industries and services in Sudan right now. It's too early to talk about this now.
We'll, of course, have a change in the US government in another 14 days, and Africa was barely a focus under the Trump administration. Might engagement with Sudan get the same level of attention in a Biden administration?
I guess Sudan will have more focus from the Biden situation because, as we all know, Trump was more pragmatic, was more focused with making the American economy more pragmatic in interests and more richer without helping any of the other countries who might need help in strategic regions like Africa. So, and Sudan is in a very important strategic, it has a very important geographical side for the US and for the politics and economy of the US. But Trump was more pragmatic and was more focused in the America's economy and how to save more money and how not to spend much. I guess Biden is more liberal, and the Democrats have shown that they are more interested in strategic influence of the US more than the economic influence over other countries. They are more interested in politics, and I guess the Biden administration likes the fact that now Sudan enjoys a civilian government. So it's a very good chance for America to show African countries that they are ready and helpful to civilian-led governments. This is an opportunity that this new government of the US shouldn't, in my opinion, miss with Sudan, because it's a great opportunity to have Sudan back on the right track economically and politically in this strategic region.
Indeed. Sarah Kira in Cairo, thank you for your insights tonight. Now let's pull back and focus on the wider economy. The World Bank is arguing that the global economy could be in for a lost decade as COVID-19 cases continue to surge. In its Global Economic Prospects report, the bank forecasts that global potential growth, which assumes that the economy is operating at full employment and at full capacity, will slow down to just 1.9% a year between 2020 and 2029. Before the pandemic, potential growth was expected to be in the region of 2.1% a year over that decade, as CGTN's Roy Ruttenberg now explains from Washington.
Well, the World Bank says delays in vaccine distribution could subdue a good chunk of the growth. It projects 1.6% global growth if infections continue to rise and the worldwide rollout of a vaccine doesn't keep up. But if the pandemic comes under control and vaccines allow shuttered economies to open up once more, global growth for 2021 could reach 5%, according to the bank. Its report also suggests that the economic effects of the pandemic could be long-lasting, quote, a decade of growth disappointments if reforms in areas like public health, budget policies, and central banking aren't introduced. Remember, even before the coronavirus outbreak, the World Bank predicted a downturn in global economic output. Well, China's economy may help offset some of that. Its economy was the only major one to grow in 2020, albeit just 2%. The bank expects the Chinese economy to expand by almost 8% this year. That's 1 point higher than its previous projection. While Beijing's recovery is pushing up the aggregate GDP in emerging markets and developing economies. But per capita income in those places has dropped significantly because of COVID-19. That's tipped millions of people back into poverty. And governments there have borrowed more to offset it, a one-year spike in debts not seen in decades. Well, the World Bank expects the Eurozone's output to grow by 3.6% this year after a decline of more than double that in 2020. Japan's economy is forecast to grow 2.5%. Again, it shrank by more than double that last year. And the bank tones down for the U.S. It says a resurgence in infections stalled third quarter growth. American GDP now expected to expand by 3.5%, which is roughly the same as its contraction in 2020. Roy Ruttenberg, CGTN in Washington.
Back to North Africa, the Central Bank of Egypt is renewing a number of procedures that it put in place since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, the CBE's decision includes extending the suspension of fees on cash withdrawals from ATMs and banking transactions in Egyptian pounds until the middle of the year. The Apex Bank had renewed those measures back in September. They were originally expected to be lifted at the end of 2020. CGTN's Yasser Hakim now looks at the reaction to this decision from Cairo.
Cancelling banking fees and commissions on transactions are part of a series of financial packages by the Central Bank of Egypt introduced after the outbreak of the coronavirus in early 2020. The aim is to soften the negative effects of the pandemic on Egyptians.
The initiative serves several purposes. First, it reduces the possibility of long queues or crowds in banks because online banking and ATM are included. Waiving fees and commissions has cost banks a lot of money, but the overall benefit on the citizens and the market is more important at this stage.
With the second wave of COVID-19 hitting the country, the CBE decided to extend this initiative till July 2021.
The central bank has had a great stand during the crisis, supporting the Egyptian people on many occasions, like cancelling the fees on transactions, and also when loan installments were postponed for 6 months on all clients. It was a good idea, optional and well received by people.
It is important, and it shows that the government feels the suffering of the people and is working on it. And it's not just individuals, but businesses were also affected and are in need of such initiatives.
This is not the only decision taken by the Central Bank of Egypt. It has given more breathing room for companies and individuals in the ailing tourism sector as well.
The fiscal package has been extended by 6 months to several sectors, but a whole year for the tourism industry. It entails postponing installment payments on personal loans by a year, subsidizing the salaries for tourism employees, postponing loan payments for tourism companies, and a 3-year grace period on their dues.
Experts say these measures would help the strategic sectors survive the effects of the pandemic so that it can add value to the economy post-COVID-19. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
A quick run through some company news. Let's start in East Africa. Kenya's largest telecommunications operator, Safaricom, had its share price hit an all-time high of about 35 shillings. That's roughly 32 US cents in Tuesday's trading session. Safaricom's market cap at the Nairobi Securities Exchange now accounts for 61% of the entire market valuation following that rise in the company's share price. The company's shares have risen by at least 7% since the middle of December, when the Central Bank of Kenya announced that the emergency waivers for mobile money transactions would expire at the end of 2020. Those waivers came into place when the pandemic hit the country in the middle of March. Uganda, right next door, has consolidated its position as the biggest roaming market for Kenyan mobile operators in the 3 months to September 2020. Data from the Communications Authority of Kenya shows that voice calls from the East African nation totaled nearly 65 million minutes in the quarter. Uganda's dominance was followed by South Sudan and Rwanda, which registered 4.15 million minutes and just over 4 million minutes, respectively. Eastern Platinum delivered its first platinum group metal concentrate for sale in December after a hiatus of more than 7 years. The Vancouver-based firm is currently undertaking a rights issue, looking to raise about $25 million in a scheme that closes on the 22nd of January. East Plats intends to use the net proceeds of the offering on capital projects that will be focused on platinum group metal opportunities. And finally, the French tyre maker Michelin is planning to cut some 11% of its workforce over 3 years. That comes as the company is slashing costs and reinforcing activities outside its core business. Michelin's share price was up 0.7% shortly after the market opened, outperforming a 0.15% rise in the CAC 40. That's a run through your company headlines. You're watching Global Business Africa. Here's what's coming up next. Kenyan flour exporters are facing an entirely new tax. We'll get reactions from the sector. And China's foreign minister has wrapped up his tour in the DR Congo. The details coming up next.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference. Welcome back to the program. Tunisia's president will launch a national dialogue in the weeks to come that will include political parties and representatives of young people from across the country. Now, the presidency is arguing that the dialogue proposed by the Tunisian General Labour Union, the UGTT, is looking for economic, social and political reforms in the North African state. Here's CGTN's Arin Chwachi with the details.
President Qais Said declared that the comprehensive national dialogue involving all stakeholders aims at developing a strategy to address the stifling crisis facing Tunisia. The head of state says the initiative will also bolster national solidarity and prevent the country from sinking into chaos and divisions.
Unlike the previous dialogue initiatives, the new talks cannot be effective without involving all parties, but especially youth from all regions who can come up with solutions. The demands of Tunisians are the same since 10 years ago. Almost nothing was achieved, but the situation in some sectors has become worse.
The Secretary General of the Tunisian General Labour Union, UGTT, said the country is currently experiencing a very difficult socio-economic situation, which has been further exacerbated by the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic.
The Labour Union's National Dialogue Initiative is geared towards finding solutions to the current crisis. We call for national choices that we can develop together because the state is facing unprecedented political, economic and social challenges. The support of the president is important because the presidency is neutral and can bring all Tunisians together.
Analysts stress the need to ensure a favorable social climate in Tunisia in order to keep households and companies afloat, protect jobs and incomes, and prevent the economy from collapsing.
Unusual problems require exceptional measures and solutions in 2021. The economy is completely paralyzed due to the impact of the pandemic, but also the spread of social unrest. Sit-ins and strikes continue throughout the country. Only a serious dialogue initiative involving all parties can stabilize Tunisia and revive the economy.
In December 2015, the Tunisian General Labour Union, the Employers' Organization, the Human Rights League and the National Bar Association received the Nobel Peace Prize. The quartet helped pull the country back from civil war in 2013. Tunisians hope that the new initiative by the President and the UGTT will save the country. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
On to East Africa, Kenya's exporters of fresh produce from this month will now start paying at least 4 times more for a cess tax. A letter from the Horticultural Crops Directorate to the industry essentially directs all exporters of horticultural produce to pay this new cess tax from the 1st of January 2021. That cess is based on the free onboard value of the goods being exported and not the actual volume of it, in line with these new horticulture regulations. Essentially what they're doing is that they've raised the assessed cess levy from the previous figure of 30 cents a kilo to 0.25% of the customs value. Additionally, exporters also now have to make those payments up front instead of paying them later on as they used to in the past. The Kenya Flour Council is opposed to this particular directive. It argues that it counters all relief initiatives by the government to cushion businesses from the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. So let's explore the impact of this change in tax policy in a bit more detail. Clement Elesi is the CEO of the Kenya Flour Council. He joins us now live on the program. Thank you for your time this evening, sir. Before I get into the tax side of it, let's start with the broad health of the sector. Between January and October, we saw flour exports fall by at least 17% compared to the same period in 2019. How are jobs and livelihoods affected in 2020?
It has been a difficult period for us in the flour industry in 2020. As you know, from March, when there was a lockdown in Europe, which is our biggest market. Europe accounts for about 70% of our market. And therefore, when we had a lockdown in all the major destinations or countries in Europe, it definitely affected us immediately because flours were not considered an essential, and therefore we were not able to put them on the shelf in supermarkets and also with the florists. And therefore we dropped, and from March up to around the end of May, we were right on our knees. We had fallen really down, and it was difficult for us to continue surviving. But from May, we have seen that the demand started picking up with and especially as we drew into August, with the lessening of the lockdown in most of the countries in Europe, we have seen that demand has picked up. And we were just on the upward. If we look at what we are doing now, probably we may be at about 85-90% of what we expect to be doing right now. And we were expecting that the full recovery of the industry would be around June 2021. We have done everything that we can to cushion the growers and exporters and to make sure that they continue growing and exporting. We have readmitted almost all the workers that had been sent away, either on paid or unpaid leave. And as we speak, all the farms are operational. But this is being jeopardized, of course, by the taxes that we're going to talk about. But we were on an upward trend. Just looking at 2021, we were hopeful that through the Valentines, where we sell most of our produce, we should be able to start recovering and moving towards 95 or 100% by June 2021.
Indeed. So cess taxes on the sector, this also changed smack in the middle of this economic crisis. The Gazette notice came out in the middle of 2020 in June, I believe. So walk us through exactly how this change was implemented and what it does to the cash flows of flower farms.
You need to recall that a lot of what the rebates the government had given us, including the corporate tax and also on the taxation on income, VAT, they have withdrawn starting this month. And therefore, we do not continue to enjoy some of the taxes that we were given the last 7 months. And therefore, just this comes in even to make the situation worse. We are still we are still very fragile coming from COVID. We are very, very, very fragile. And we are hoping that the government will look at an industry like ours, which deals with perishables. We export every day, and therefore any any rebate on tax would have given us an easy cushion going forward and helped us to recover quickly. But now that all the tax relief that had given us 7 months ago has been taken away, and now we have a new tax that has come in, this just comes in to compound the story of the industry. As we see this, initially we were paying 30 cents Kenya shillings per kilo, but now the new directive is that we are moving away from the kilos now to a value tax, which means that we'll be paying at least 4 times of what we were paying before. We have survived as an industry not because we make a lot of money, but because we are organized and we know that if we continue exporting every day, the little that we make the little profit that we make on a daily basis can be able to accumulate, and we become much more progressive as an industry moving forward. And that is how we have survived.
There's also an element of prepayment as well to this particular cess tax, because that at face value will just kill your cash flows, won't it?
Exactly. It's very, very difficult for you to determine how much you are going to sell, especially on the auction. Over 50% of our produce is sold on the auction, and it's very difficult for us to even predetermine how much that value is. So if the government is expecting us to be paying this prior to shipment, what are we talking about? It's very, very difficult, and in fact, it's almost impossible to determine how much we are going to pay. The thing is that you'll be paying, but by the time your produce reaches the auction, the prices on the auction have fallen, and so it will just be a loss. And this is what we are saying. We need to continue paying as we have done before. We ship, and we provide the documentation about the shipping, and we pay after we have sold. And that is how business is done. Anywhere, you cannot determine how much you are going to fetch from the market before you sell. So it doesn't really make sense for the government to be telling us that you need to pay this on FOB, which means that you are paying based on what you have not sold. It's actually not possible in this case. And therefore, if we are looking at an industry that is very fragile, and now we have to pay tax 4 times what we've been paying, this just goes into, for us, it's an interpretation of how the government actually considered this industry. We have worked very, very hard to become one of the top foreign earners for the country, among the top 4. We have come a long way, from a small industry 10 years ago to one of the formidable ones at the moment. And this is just out of our organization. I would say that this industry is actually private sector driven. So we have done a lot of work on our own to be able to be where we are.
Let me just interrupt there very briefly, because it's in addition to all the other taxes you mentioned. So the cess tax has gone up essentially by a factor of 4. The tax reliefs on income tax, on value-added tax, that's gone. In addition to that, there's now a minimum turnover tax, 1.5. I believe that's charged at 1%. There's a digital service tax at 1.5%. Do those directly affect your members as well?
All those taxes affect us. Especially when you look at our business at the auction, all of those taxes affect us directly and on a daily basis. We are not an industry that will wait for those taxes to affect us 1 month down the line. As it comes into effect, it affects us on a daily basis. So from 1st of January, we are paying all those taxes. And you can imagine, a study that we did a few years ago, about 5 years ago, was showing that this industry pays up to 42 taxes in a year. So which industry can survive with 42 taxes in a year? That is absurd. And we expect that the government should be able to come in and give us relief. If they're looking at really growing this industry to become one of the major industries, as we have seen, then the government should be able to facilitate trade and business, but we are not seeing that from government.
All right, we'll leave it there for the time being. Clement Tulezi, CEO of the Kenya Flour Council, thank you very much for your insights on the program tonight. Right, and away from East Africa's horticultural sector, let's move on to the DRC. China's foreign minister has held a meeting with his DRC counterpart, Marie Ntumba Nzenza, in the Congolese capital of Kinshasa. The two leaders discussed ways of strengthening trade ties, and they signed a memorandum of understanding to improve the Belt and Road Initiative. Minister Wang Yi said that China is committed to carrying out mutually beneficial projects aimed at boosting the relationship between the two sides. The DRC is among 44 nations that China will support to build road and rail projects to connect the region to markets in Asia. He also said that China will support the DRC in its fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. Here's CGTN's Chris Ochamringa with the details.
The foreign minister, Wang Yi, met with senior officials of the DRC, the president, and discussed a lot about promoting trade. You know, the DRC, China is the DRC's largest trading partner. There are more than 80 companies operating here, particularly in the mining sector. And so the two leaders discussed, you know, the boosting of trade relations to continue what has been going on for a very long time. They also discussed about infrastructure projects, which is part of the agreement, the commitment that African leaders made in 2018 in Beijing during the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation Summit. This is the year that they're supposed to implement the commitments that the leaders made, particularly construction of roads, railways, and hydropower dams. The DRC is supposed to, you know, get funding from China to carry out this project that's supposed to connect about 70 African countries to China and Asia to boost trade. They also discussed the issue of the fight against COVID-19, the COVID-19 pandemic. The DRC is experiencing the second wave of infections. Very many people have died, and so China has expressed its commitment to support the government to end this pandemic.
Earlier on, we spoke to DavidottoEndley. He's the Director of Strategic Programs at the Geneva Center for African Security and Strategic Studies. He explained the significance of the Chinese Foreign Minister's visit to Africa's largest copper producer.
I think it is very significant, especially for the long-term diplomatic, economic, political, and kind of a security relations that the DRC has had with the Chinese People's Republic. This is not the first time that China is exchanging visits to the DRC. They've had an extensive relations that has been since the 1970s, if not before that. So I think it's important for the fairly new government of the Republic of Congo, DRC, to be able to really exploit a win-win situation between the DRC and China, because it's important to always have that sincere but also bilateral benefit from the economic and also the political strength of China. I think the most important thing is for that relationship that is already existing to be maintained. Each country, should have a priority. For the DRC, I would believe that one of the key priorities for them would be matters of security. I mean, we witnessed attacks, in the northern part of Congo, especially in the Kivu region. So I think one of the most important aspects, that would drive economic stability or any economic relations with, China or any other country would be the stabilization of the DRC. Remember that, DRC is neighbors to Central African Republic, where, rebel groups are currently, having a very, powerful stand, especially out of Bangui. So I think, what, China and DRC should be talking about is how to enhance the cooperation beyond, or stabilize the current cooperation, but also beyond economic and other infrastructural developments. To be able to secure these infrastructures, you need security. So security would be one of the key areas.
Following a 5-month lockdown, South Africa eased domestic travel restrictions, effectively allowing hotels to reopen. Now, international borders are still closed, but the government put its hopes on domestic tourism for the sector's revival. Here's CGTN's Alexandria Majala with that story.
The V&A waterfront in South Africa's Cape Town is normally abuzz with tourists from around the world. But lately, it has remained empty with just a few local customers coming in now and then to enjoy the city's scenic views.
Yeah, if you look around, it's really quite sad. I mean, this would normally a bustling part of the waterfront, and Robben Island would be running queues. But I think the opportunity for locals now is that this offer is going to be available without the queues, without the busyness.
South Africa remains among the countries hardest hit by the pandemic. And with recession-battered consumers watching their pocketbooks, many in the sector expect an uphill battle.
Financially, everything has been a backlog on paying my bills, my debts as well. So all of that has been on hold even up to now. So we're actually looking forward to when we reopen, how is it going to be?
Abundant wildlife, stunning scenery and renowned vineyards have made the country one of the world's most iconic long-haul travel destinations, establishing tourism as a pillar of the economy. South Africa Tourism, the sector's marketing agency, was targeting 8.7% year-on-year growth in inbound arrivals in 2020, with total tourist spending projected to reach $16.2 billion. But COVID-19 brought the sector to a screeching halt as governments closed borders and imposed lockdowns.
The closing of our borders has impacted us because 70% of our tourists are international, especially in the safari lodge properties. So at this point, those properties are not being booked at all. Local tourism really in Cape Town it can survive, but it's at a hugely reduced rate. So for us, we really are opening just for the purpose of keeping our staff employed.
To cope, many businesses laid off staff or slashed wages. Others have gone bust. According to South Africa Tourism, nearly 440,000 tourism jobs are at risk this year. The sector is expected to lose 75% of projected revenues and $5.4 billion in foreign receipts. When the pandemic struck, South Africa was already in recession. The economy is projected to shrink by 7.2% this year, and widespread lockdown layoffs have added to a pre-COVID jobless rate of 30%. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
It's 18:38 GMT. You're watching Global Business Africa. Here's what's coming up next. Car sales in Japan have fallen to the lowest level in nearly a decade. And Malaysia has allowed citizens to prematurely dip into their pensions in order to cope with economic pressures. The details coming up shortly.
It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what do you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are these stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back to the program. These are some of the stories making your headlines at this hour. China's foreign minister has held a meeting with his DRC counterpart, Marie Ntumbanzenza, in the Congolese capital, Kinshasa. The two leaders discussed ways of strengthening bilateral trade ties, and they signed a memorandum of understanding to implement the Belt and Road Initiative. Minister Wang Yi said China is committed to carrying out mutually beneficial projects aimed at boosting the relationship between the two countries. In East Africa, the Ethiopian government says it has started work to rehabilitate the Tigray region after a law enforcement operation there came to a close. It says it has embarked on opening humanitarian corridors and repatriating refugees while collaborating with the UN to provide relief services. Ethiopian authorities say the repatriation of refugees, mainly from Sudan, as well as the resettlement of internally displaced persons, is progressing well. United Nations officials have paid tribute to fallen peacekeepers from Burundi, Bangladesh and Cameroon. The peacekeepers died while on duty in the Central African Republic on different occasions. 3 Burundian peacekeepers were slain on Christmas Day by armed men ahead of elections on the 27th of December. A Cameroonian national was killed in a road accident. The Bangladeshi officer fell ill. And finally, Roger Lumbala, a former lawmaker in the DRC, has been arrested by authorities in France. For years, Lumbala has faced accusations of leading the armed group, the RCDN. He was arrested by French authorities for alleged complicity in crimes against humanity. Lumbala has always denied militia chief. The Nobel Peace Laureate, Dr. Denis Mukwege, however, has hailed his arrest. In a statement, he said impunity was the main reason for continued massacres in the DRC. That's a run through your headlines. Away from the African continent, in Japan, vehicle sales are down by 11.5% in 2020 compared to the year before, amid all the economic carnage caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. That is the largest decline in car sales in nearly 9 years in Japan. More than 4.5 million new cars were sold last year, including mini vehicles with engines no larger than 660 cubic centimeters, or K cars as they're classified in that particular part of the world. Sales excluding K cars fell by 12.3%. Toyota Motor logged a 6% decline in domestic sales. Its competitors were hit even harder. They saw double-digit declines. Analysts argue that the sector has seen sales rebound since the government lifted a nationwide state of emergency over COVID-19 in May. Now, in order to get its 2021 budget through Parliament with a razor-thin majority, Malaysia demands to allow millions of citizens to prematurely dip into their state pensions. Studies suggest that most Malaysians already have far too little saved up for retirement, but worry in and of itself. Right now, many feel they simply have no choice but to tap into their pensions to keep their heads above the water. CGTN's Ryan Meltzer has the details from Kuala Lumpur.
For the next few, these will automatically get licenses and be allowed to set up stalls almost anywhere in the capital. A government measure to help people stay afloat financially during the pandemic. The government is also allowing some 8 million working-age Malaysians to withdraw up to $2,500 from their state pensions.
It may not sound like a huge amount, but more than half of Malaysians will have less than $12,500 in their pension funds when they retire. And just 1/3 of the population will have adequate savings for their retirement.
it's a very tough decision for the government, given that it is actually the contributors' money. So they have the right to have access to their funds, to their savings, especially in the event of a distress situation, because you do not want the households to get into deeper problems.
People are planning to use the funds to pay off debts, pay their rent, invest in small businesses. Raja Faisal works as a telecoms technician and part-time as a security guard, but has still seen his income dip sharply in recent months.
I'm definitely worried about using the savings made for my old age, but I need money to survive, for daily expenses, and to support my wife and kids.
Malaysia's retirement age is still set at just 60, despite life expectancy now being in the mid-70s. And with Malaysians having the second highest levels of personal debt in Asia, allowing mass pension drawdowns is a worry.
In the longer term, it will substantially reduce the amount that they will have for their retirement savings. Once the economy recovers and they are able to increase their income, they should put aside more money for their savings.
Raja Faisal says he is planning to do just that, if and when his income rebounds to pre-pandemic levels. Ryan Meltzer, CGTN, Kuala Lumpur.
Qatar's economy, in the meantime, is forecast to rebound in 2021. Standard Chartered is forecasting GDP growth of at least 3%. The bank revised its forecast, and it's much higher than the 2.2% that the country gave last month when issuing its 2021 budget. Now, Tuesday's easing of a 3-year-old regional dispute with neighbours, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Egypt, and so on, is set to help Qatar return to economic growth. Qatar expects to run its largest budget deficit in 4 years in 2021 as it tries to shake off the effect of the coronavirus and the drag, especially on public finances, of lower energy prices. The country is expected to spend nearly $9.4 billion more than it will raise from domestic taxes. Now, the projected shortfall will be the largest since 2017. On to Thailand. The country's relative success in containing COVID-19 for the most part of 2020 has been overshadowed by the pandemic's impact on its economy. The Central Bank of Thailand is expecting growth of just over 3% this year, but uncertainties remain as the country continues to grapple with a rise in infections, unresolved political instability, and relatively weak tourism receipts.
Phuket, Pattaya, Bangkok's Khao San Road. These scenes, as surreal as they are terrifying. Thailand's tourist towns deprived of what gave it life, ravaged by a virus that came in January 2020 and became a long-stay visitor. When international flights stopped, foreign tourists disappeared and places that depend on tourism changed almost immediately. During high season, 50,000 people could pack onto Khao San Road. This is a backpacking hub of Asia. But looking at this road now, we can clearly see the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on Thailand. Hundreds of hostels around here were once teeming with backpackers. Now, only a handful of hostels remain.
99% of our guests are foreigners. We have 100% occupancy all year. So when this happened, it's hard to accept. 90% of hotels in this area have permanently closed.
Nat Park Hostel has managed to stay afloat by adapting, turning their hostel into a kitchen, their hotel staff into kitchen hands. But they too don't know how long they can tread water. 2020 was meant to be a good year for Thai tourism. The country expected $130 billion from tourism receipts alone, a vital pillar of the economy generating almost 20% of GDP. But that pillar came crashing down.
We have a supply for 39.8 million tourists, but right now we're closing at 6.7 million. So, a lot of people, a lot of hotels will eventually close down. Among the 4-star plus hotels, about 35% of the workforce have been furloughed. Take in the hotels that are still closed, you can imagine how many people are out of jobs.
The country has struggled to find a balance between health security and economic survival. There was hope for a quick domestic economic revival as COVID-19 was contained in June. But then months of growing political unrest swept across the country. And just before peak domestic travel season, the country was blindsided by another wave of COVID-19. Still, the Bank of Thailand is optimistic that 2021 will see the economy bounce back with a growth of 3.2%.
The driving force of the Thai economy would be on. So if we have this gradual recovery of the global economy, exports, which account for over 60% of the Thailand's GDP, the recovery of the exports could help or mitigate the risks of domestic demand.
The GDP, a measure of the nation's net income, may be positive, but it perhaps does not tell the whole story. The untold misery of Thailand's informal workforce, the millions of food vendors, masseuses, taxi drivers, hotel clerks, who together make up the vibrant grassroots human infrastructure that made Thailand one of the most visited countries in the world. Lucita Saogao, CGTN, Bangkok, Thailand.
Haptic technology is being deployed by a Spanish-based firm in crafting a vest aimed at gamers. Now, the gadget essentially transports players into a virtual world. It allows them to feel physical sensations. Its creators believe there's also potential application well beyond gaming, perhaps in education and even aiding social awareness.
Thanks to a new haptic gaming vest, gamers can now literally feel the sensation of digital darts hitting them, or even spiders crawling up their back. The 3D touch gadget has proven a revelation for fans already visually and aurally immersed in digital gaming.
And the most incredible thing is that you're not only feeling frontally but also in the back. You are playing and then you feel that something happens behind you. So it is impressive to live it.
You turn and you hit, you turn and you shoot, and you feel from where you are being shot. Many times when you play a shooter game, you know that you are being shot, but you don't know from where. Games makers started with sound. They implemented 360-degree sound, thanks to which you could hear where the shots were coming from. But with this vest, it's impressive because you know that you have been hit in the right side of your torso.
The haptic gaming vest was created by Malaga-based Owo Game. It is one of a number of companies trying to translate in-game digital sensations to gamers' physical bodies. The new wireless wearable replicas over 30 different sensations, from the push of heavy wind to lifting weights.
Owo is unique because we can create physical sensation based on an electromuscle stimulation. The end user can feel exactly the same like the avatar. So, in this way, we can convert digital world into reality.
The vest is set to be launched in early 2021 and will cost between €400 and €450. The wearable can be controlled using an app. Gamers can calibrate the sensations, including the intensity. The wireless system is compatible with PC, mobile console and VR gaming and works with operating systems, including iOS, Android, Nintendo and Sony. Mike Fox, CGTN.
A quick run through commodity prices. Let's start with the metal side of it. Platinum prices back to levels seen last in the middle of 2016. South Africa, of course, is one of the largest producers of that metal and its sister element, palladium. And the recent rallies are partly a reflection of concerns about supply as COVID-19 cases are surging in Africa's most industrialized economy, crossed the 1 million mark recently. Palladium over $2,430 an ounce. Gold has lost steam. It fell by over 2% at 16.31 GMT. Brent futures up by over 5% so far in the year, as the anticipated decline in demand due to the pandemic has been partially offset by the latest decision by Saudi Arabia to cut output, especially in February and in March. Now, back in 1992, an enterprising woman started the first African restaurant in South Africa, serving food inspired by her travels across the continent. She then partnered with another lady to put together a cookbook inspired by her travels. Today, that very same restaurant is still thriving. CGTN's Julie Shire spent some time there and filed this report.
I love Africa. I simply love this continent, from the fact that it has a most beautiful shape to the people throughout, from and the South Africa, right up to North Africa. I love it. I've traveled to Egypt, Morocco. I love all of different parts of Africa.
Hi, I'm Lumai, and this is my mom.
And I'm Portia.
And we are the Food of Africa. It's amazing to be here in Cape Town because this market, the Ranyuzut market, has the best organic fresh vegetables. And it's inspired us to cook something nice today.
And you know, whenever we come to the market, we just look and see what they have, what are the fresh things they have, and we make up our mind what we're going to have for supper. And today, we're going to be doing a West African fishy mojo. Now, I just saw some lovely fresh hake that I bought, and then the veggies were totally amazing. So I've got fresh chilies, fresh red peppers, lovely salad, and now that it's spring, it's such a beautiful day here today, we are going to have fishy mojo for lunch. This is how they do it in Africa. The deliciousness of that fish inspired me to come up with this fish imojo recipe.
So which is it? Oh, this one.
So the fish I got from the
This is like an emoji is like a what? A salad?
A salad. It's a fish salad. And also because, as I said at the market, so hot, and I feel for something fishy. So we
it's like a seafood
thing.
Right.
And also because I eat a lot of fish along that Senegal coast.
Yes,
yeah, so
it's quite a staple of the west of Africa.
It is.
Eat very fresh and light fish.
It is. They call it chibujin,
but yours is an emoji for our South African trips.
So I've got my hake already flaked, and then there are my shrimps. These are the main ingredients of the fish emoji. So now the salad.
So that's what I'm chopping for. I'm chopping all the fresh stuff. Okay, so it's parsley,
so you need parsley, bell peppers, garlic. And then that's it, and spring onion. Where's your spring onion?
Spring onion.
Good.
All right, so that's what's going in my salad.
Portia, this book here, it has everything on Africa.
All from my trips on Africa, yes.
Must be. So it's a journey, an adventure.
Yes, yeah. So there's inspiration from all the countries that we've traveled to as a family over many, many years. And it's not directly like the food that you might find there, but inspired by what they grow there, you know, the sort of flavors and stuff that we found there. So it's inspired by Africa.
South African flair is interesting because it's kind of a melting pot because we are so many from the Cape Malay to the Indians in Durban, from the different cultures, and also because we are a melting pot from the British that come here, that came the Afrikaners, and also the indigenous people, the Khoisan people, and different African. So it's kind of a mix. So I kind of just let do the flavoring. So when I bring my South African flavor to a lot of the African dishes, it's with the spice and the herbs.
But what I can tell by just what you've done here is this combination of scents, of smell, and
yes.
This, not only the color, but just the smell is incredible. How fresh.
Yeah, it is. All my dishes and all my take, whenever I interpret a dish, I try, there's always a freshness to it. And for me, the color is important and also the flavors, because I'm not a person that cooks with a lot of stock cubes or tin stuff. Everything has to, I must make sure the flavor comes from the actual ingredients.
And it also is an affordable dish. I mean,
it's very affordable because you can use any fish and you can have any bread that you want to.
It's delicious.
Good.
Yes. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
For allowing me to come to your kitchen.
It's been lovely having you with us.
It's been very lovely having you with us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And that wraps up Global Business. The World to Date up next from Washington, D.C.